So welcome. I'm very pleased to be here today with His Excellency Dr. Ashraf Ghani, the President of Afghanistan. His visit here is a proof and a testimony to the long-standing and friendly relations that we have between our two countries. We have had productive, positive talks, and I would also like to highlight a few important points that we have discussed. First, Sweden's support and engagement of Afghanistan is very broad. It includes military, political, and police support, and of course, humanitarian. And it's a long-term development cooperation. I also underlined that our commitment is long-lasting. Afghanistan is, in fact, the largest receiver of Swedish bilateral aid, and Sweden has committed up to 8.5 billion Swedish kronor over the next 10 years. Second, to further strengthen our relations, we have today signed a development cooperation agreement, and that agreement includes a deeper dialogue on human rights, in particular the situation and the rights of women and girls, as well as on democracy and anti-corruption. The people of Afghanistan have Sweden's full support in their pursuit of peace and democracy. And when President Ghani took over about a year ago, it was the first peaceful transfer of power in more than 100 years. And Sweden supports President Ghani's commitment to peace process. Third, an important subject of our talks was, of course, the refugee situation. Many refugees coming to Sweden are from Afghanistan or they are Afghans, and many of them are unaccompanied minors. And this year, about 20,000 minors, primarily young men, have come to Sweden. And this is, of course, a serious challenge for both our countries. And we have agreed today to start negotiations on a readmission agreement. Such an agreement will facilitate the return. But also it's important for both our countries to discuss the so-called push and pull factors. So we are also fully supporting for example, the Jobs for Peace process that the President has initiated. Fourth, we have also discussed security issues. We give support to Afghanistan, and the international support, security support to Afghanistan is the largest international support operation since the Second World War, intended to promote peace, security, and reconstruction. And since 2002, almost 10,000 Swedes have contributed to this operation, helping to improve the security situation in northern Afghanistan. And the Swedish government has recently presented a bill to the parliament to extend our support to the current NATO-led training mission over the next year. Fifth and lastly, I would like to emphasize that Sweden is closely following the very ambitious reform program of the Afghan government. The Afghan government has committed itself to free and fair elections, respect for human rights, the rule of law, and also a strong anti-corruption measures. Many reforms will strengthen the situation of women and girls, which is very welcome. And I do believe that the Afghan government is genuinely committed to taking the country forward, and some results have already been achieved. So Sweden's support depends, of course, also on continued and real progress, and we don't hesitate. That progress will be made. And I believe that, Mr. President, our constructive dialogue here today and our new cooperation agreement reflects our shared commitment also for the future. Please, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. It's a great pleasure to be received so warmly during a cold weather outside. The warmth inside contrasts very sharply with the cold outside, but it's these warm hearts that give us the confidence. We've just celebrated the 75th anniversary of our friendship, we look forward to many decades of deepening, of broadening of this partnership and friendship. Let me first pay tribute to 8 Swedes who paid the ultimate sacrifice of losing their lives as part of love for strangers and in defense of the idea of liberty. Mr. Prime Minister, I call on you and all the media that on behalf of a grateful nation and a grateful state, please convey our most sincere thanks and our deepest sympathies to the families of these heroes of the struggle for freedom and rights. I would also like to thank all the 10,000 members of the Swedish forces that served in Afghanistan. I hope that they carry part of Afghanistan as part of their memories, and we look very much forward to the day when we can welcome them as tourists and civilians back in our country. Let me first say that we'd be delighted and very proud to support Sweden's candidacy for the Security Council. Sweden serving on the Security Council will always be an asset to the voice of peace, voice of reason, and voice of engagement. Let me also take this opportunity to thank Sweden's society, and not just the government. We're delighted with our government-to-government cooperation, but what gives us special pleasure is to acknowledge the help of every Swede that has supported the Swedish committee. In 1990, everybody practically left Afghanistan and said, let them sink to whatever hellhole they can sink to. But the Swedish committee stayed with us. For 10 years, particularly from 96 to 2001, the Swedish committee was in effect serving the functions of both the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health in Afghanistan. So there are hundreds of thousands of young girls and boys who are the beneficiaries of that engagement. On behalf of every one of them, let me thank the Swedish people. Also, thousands of women teachers were trained who, in turn, are now training the 3 million young girls that are attending school. Hundreds of other women whose chances of dying at birth have been halved because of the measures that your government has supported and the Swedish committee is implemented. Sweden's support, first participation for the NATO ISAF mission and now for the Resolute Support mission, is a vote of confidence in a country that poses no harm to anyone, but has been denied the very basic right of living in peace. And your continued engagement is welcomed by all our armed forces and our people, and I'd like to thank you for that support. The statement that your foreign minister made in the NATO meeting a couple of days ago was enormously productive, and we hope that the Swedish Parliament would support the continued engagement of your forces. Your bilateral assistance is forward-looking. Sweden is the first country to commit to supporting Afghanistan until 2024, and we are extraordinarily grateful for this principled assistance. All the areas of focus mean a stable and hopefully a prosperous Afghanistan. It's about education, it's about energy, it's about empowerment, particularly of women and girls, it's about rule of law, it's about entrepreneurship, and in these areas, we all find common values. Let me assure you that the government of Afghanistan is committed to an agenda of transparency, effectiveness, and participation in rule of law. As a result of this, the corruption that we inherited, that next to narcotics, is given us an enormously poor reputation, is something that we are determined to tackle root, stock, and branch Some of the evidence is already in front of everyone, but we are determined to do this. Peace is the key desire of every Afghan, and the nature of the conflict that is three-dimensional has been discussed with you. There's the presence of regional terrorists ranging from Al-Qaeda to Daesh, and we need to understand that a robust strategic response to this type of terror that does not seek peace with governments and with civilized society is a must, and that is an important one. Second, the Taliban are both an Afghan and a Pakistani phenomenon. Now they are a cross-regional phenomena, and we need to have a coherent approach where there are legitimate grievances. A political process needs to address this, and the grounds need to be prepared for participation in a peace process, the net result of which would be adherence to the Afghan constitution in participation. The rights of Afghans in general and Afghan women and girls is not up for negotiation. Chapter 2 of the Constitution regarding fundamental rights and Chapter 1 of the Constitution regarding our democratic and Islamic nature are not up for discussion. Any peace process that requires changes in our Constitution must follow the constitutionally laid out process, because the Constitution has constitutional process for changing it. And it's important. But we are engaging in peace. And third, and most significantly, there's been an undeclared state of hostilities between Pakistan and Afghanistan. We need to address this, because regional peace requires agreement between the states on the rules of the game, and rules of the game that would make all the states fulfill their rights and obligations. Migration is a human tragedy and a human phenomenon. During 19th century, at least 1.2 million Swedes left their countries to seek their fortunes in other shores. Waves of German migration, Irish migration, others were part and parcel of the rule. But then there was the United States that was in need of labor. As partners, we've agreed that there's a common problem that both has pull factors and push factors. The pull factors are conditions in Europe and in Sweden that make migration attractive, and those are under your consideration in terms of how you and the rest of our partners that is part of a European and global dialogue will address the pull factors. There are push factors: poverty, insecurity, lack of trust, and we will address the push factors. It also needs to be noted that a significant part of the Afghans who have ended up in Sweden have not come from Afghanistan. They've come from third countries. Because we have a 5 million diaspora living in Iran and Pakistan, so analysis of who started where is an important part of this, but partners with such profound values work together to create the framework to solve the problem. And what the Prime Minister and I have agreed is to begin focused, earnest, comprehensive discussions so we can solve the problem together and help each other addressing both the pull factors and the push factors. So again, Mr. Prime Minister, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you and to have been received with such warm hearts by Sweden in general and its elected leader in particular.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Prime Minister. My question goes to both of you. My first question, Mr. President, you...
One question only.
Okay.
Sorry. I have a plane to catch.
Okay. I think we're going together. You have a meeting with Prime Minister of Pakistan in sideline of the climate changes conference. Despite there was a statement from side of the Office of Prime Minister, but could you please tell us what was the agenda? Is it something new in your discussion or not? And if you could kindly let me know, I will finish it in 10 seconds. My question from Prime Minister. Prime Minister, there's two main concerns from refugees and migrants, Afghan migrants in Sudan, despite they love to stay here and have a different future in your country. The first concern is regarding what happened in Paris, and it will undershadow the whole situation of the migration and refugees in Europe. And the second is the concern of deportation. Could you please tell us what is the clear message to the Afghan refugees who recently came to your country toward, from side of your government? Thank you to both of you.
Mr. Prime
Please,
Minister.
please,
Me?
President.
Oh, sure. Conversations between states are not conversations between teenagers. They're between adults focused on national interests and global security. We have fundamental issues with Pakistan because we require Pakistan and us to join in a common quest for stability in the region. Our discussion is focused on the three dimensions of conflict and the need for engagement. The primary peace that we seek is between a sovereign Afghanistan and a sovereign Pakistan. Afghanistan's sovereignty is not up for negotiation. Our relations with third countries are not subjects for discussion with others. But a common quest is, in what we have assured everyone, even in the worst days of conflict in Afghanistan, is that Afghan territory will be never used against any of our neighbors, nor will Afghan state institutions ever sponsor malign state actors. What we've emphasized is the need to utilize the period between now and April for reduction of level of violence, for focusing in earnest on a climate of peace and on an agreement on seeing terrorism as a common threat, and to make sure that events like Paris do not recur, and when terrorists manifest their ugly heads, that we have a common strategic approach to deal with the problem. And discussions will follow between us through visits to Pakistan, into Afghanistan, and with our partners, including Sweden and our other partners, that we make sure that the global consensus on a dialogue between states in quest for peace results in sustainable gains for our public.
Let me just say on that, we do support this the peace process that has been started by the president. We think it's very important, of course. On migration, first, Paris, did it change or in anything affect on migration? No, we do not connect the refugee situation with the terrorist situation. People are coming from all over, from whether they come from Africa, over the sea, or whether they walk through whole of Europe. We don't see that connection that those are terrorists. We can never guarantee that there is no terrorist with them. No, we cannot guarantee that, of course not. But I mean, the majority of these people, they're fleeing for their lives. And I guess terrorists, they would choose another way of entering the country if they want to harm us. The clear message is, I mean, Sweden, nobody can doubt the ambition Sweden has to receive people that are in danger. We have, the last 2 months, received 80,000 asylum seekers. If you transfer that into European Union level, it equals to as if 25 million people a year came to European Union. That's the number of people that we have received. Everybody can see that is not sustainable. So what we're telling now that we are lowering our conditions for the asylum, the right to asylum, to a minimum standard according to international conventions and EU rules. So we're going to the minimum standard because in this situation we need to make clear also to our fellow member states in the European Union that in this situation, it is not sustainable that one country, two countries, let's say 3 countries out of 28 take this huge responsibility. We need to share that responsibility, and I've said it so many times, I'll say it again, that if we as 28 member states had dealt with this issue together, we've coped with the situation. But you cannot hand over the responsibility to 3 countries. This is why we're doing this, because we need to reduce the number of asylum seekers to Sweden and make sure that other member states take their part of the responsibility.
Lars Peterson, Swedish news agency TT. Mr. President, given the security situation in Afghanistan and the agreement that you're seeking with Sweden, which part of the country would you say is safe for the returning refugees to return to? And to Prime Minister, does Sweden need any guarantees for these returning refugees?
As the President said earlier, we're starting a negotiation now, a dialogue, because we need to look into both the push and pull factors. I told the President, with this temporary laws that we are proposing now, will be implemented, let's say in April next year. Meaning, as from now, we have new rules because of the long time before you actually can decide upon asylum seekers if he or she has right or no. So it is implemented actually as from now. So that is the pull factors that we are dealing with. But we also need to acknowledge that the job with the job for peace agenda, for example, is an important part to decrease the pull factors. Meaning that more people can want to stay in Afghanistan. They see the future in Afghanistan with jobs and education, and we are a part of that also with the development cooperation that we have, and with the new agreement we think that we can do more on this basis. But we are starting right now. We will start negotiations, a dialogue on how to find a situation that is good for both our nations. But of course we want to find a solution where those who are not approved for asylum in Sweden can find a way back to Afghanistan.
Well, first of all, I was not seeking an agreement. We are solving a joint problem. So the framing needs to be correct. Partners help each other understand a complex environment, a complex situation, and find a solution that answers the needs of some of the most needy people. Second, there's a due process framework. Sweden is a law-abiding nation and prides itself in terms of the due process. So let us understand, this is not in any immediate order for expulsion. It is based on the processes and laws that the Prime Minister articulated that creates the... In 3, we will work in earnest together to create the right set of conditions, and those right sets of conditions will be indicated and shared with you when our discussions have reached the point that they can be shared in general. Fourth, as the Prime Minister very kindly said, we're the only country, I think, that I know of that has taken the problem seriously and has proposed a remedy. The remedy is a Job for Peace program that addresses skills, jobs, and housing in an integrated manner so that we can create the conditions of stability that our people who, by rights and obligations, must have a homeland, feel that they have a secure and safe homeland and a homeland that can offer them prosperity. And that's where we particularly appreciate the new developmental framework agreement, because that's the type of agreement that can create hope in our country.
Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. President, international community want to attend next meeting of Istanbul process, in Islamabad. You attend?
I will make that answer in Kabul. Kabul is the place to make that announcement, and you'll hear in Kabul.
And Mr. Prime Minister, how you can help Afghanistan manage refugee problems?
Since we have a long standing relation, and we've, as the president said earlier, we are the first country to commit ourselves to a development cooperation for a long time, over 10 years, 8.5 billion Swedish kronor. That is of course something that will help the situation in Afghanistan in such a way that fewer people feel the need of fleeing, going to other countries. And the new agreement that we're signing today will also underline that even more. So it's all about hope and future for the people. It's about education, the right to education, the possibility to have a job, to develop and find your own life and freedom in your own country. And that is something that we have cooperated on over so many years.
Exactly.
And we will still we'll continue that cooperation.
Hello, I'm Anne-Catherine Rowe from TV4 News in Sweden. Mr. President, many young Afghan men who comes here to Sweden are refugees from Iran, your neighboring country, and they tell us stories of how they have to flee because they are forcibly recruited to fight in Syria, and they kind of end up like a cannon fodder. What would you say to them if they are forced to go back, and where will we send them back? To Afghanistan or to Iran or?
That's a question that your legal authorities must decide upon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they are Afghan citizens.
If they can prove that they're Afghan citizens, we accept them. But a lot of people in the past have pretended to be Afghans, and that also needs to be established. What documentation of proof they put on the table is extremely important. Because in the past, other people have benefited from our misery to pass themselves. And you can't blame individuals for trying. Our fundamental social contract is with our people, regardless of where they are. Afghan constitution is very clear. Anyone who's an Afghan has a right to due process and to home in Afghanistan, and that's what we honor.
Thank you. I'm Zair Qadri from Ariana News World. I have two short questions to Mr. President. How much European Union support you got to fight terrorism, especially Al-Qaeda and Daesh? And second question to Mr. Prime Minister. Afghanistan needs long-term support for stability. How committed you are for that?
President?
Please,
Okay.
after you, Mr.
No, the long-term commitment is there, as we said before. Now we have a 10-year commitment. There is no other country with that kind of commitment. It's 8.5 billion Swedish kronor over these 10 years, and added to that, we just signed a new agreement that will support this even more. So we have a long-term commitment. Our commitment is long-lasting.
The European Union is not a military force. Did you mean NATO, or did you mean European Union? NATO has made a commitment, and you've heard the statement. We're very much looking forward to this partnership, and Sweden has been a very important leader in this process, and would like to thank Sweden for its leadership and all our other partners for continuing the resolute support mission.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Agneta Ramberg, Swedish Radio. Mr. President, I'd like to go back to the push factors and the situation in Afghanistan. You were talking about the push factors, poverty, lack of hope, security situation, etc. Last year when you were elected, a lot of hope and expectations were invested in you to change this, to get rid of corruption, etc. Now we hear a lot of disappointment from the Afghan people. What has gone wrong? Do you feel that you have failed?
Well, thank you for an excellent question. People, an all-out war has been imposed on us. What's our record? We've been fighting for survival. Afghanistan situation during 2015 was like that of a country, a neutral country being invaded. We've managed to defeat the designs of the enemies of Afghanistan to create two political geographies in Afghanistan. But the price paid for this has been immense. 1 month of war could change girls' education fundamentally. 1 year of war could change the economic conditions of the people. This is an imposed war. And again, when I was in Russia, in Ufa, for the BRICS and Shanghai conference, I asked the question in front of all the leaders, who are the terrorists that are fighting in Afghanistan? They come from China, they come from Russia, they come from Uzbekistan, they come from Tajikistan, they come from Egypt, they come from Saudi Arabia, they come from North Africa. And particularly, they come from Pakistan. This is an unprecedented phenomena in the history, because wars have been either between states or non-state actors vying to become states. Daesh is the other factor. Within this context, civilian casualties, but also the casualties of our armed forces have really been significant. The worst part of my day is reading the casualty figures. What I wanted, Afghanistan's constitution assigns 16 functions to the president. The third of them is to be commander-in-chief. The first of them is to uphold the law. But I've had to spend 70% of my time being commander-in-chief. I'm enormously proud of our armed forces, but the people have a right to be disappointed. Because we expected a peace breakthrough. And again, our government reached out to Pakistan last November and argued that a comprehensive peace framework was required. Unfortunately, the opportunity was lost. Second, we inherited an economic recession bordering on a depression. And simultaneously, we had to impose a major austerity program as part of our agreement with the IMF, and I'm proud that all the conditions of that agreement have been met, including the revenue targets. But the rate of growth will be around 2.1%. We need minimally 9% rate of growth to keep up with our population. And most of our developmental efforts will have several years to yield results. The last issue, reforms hurt. Initially, those who are hurt, the entrenched interests that are hurt by reforms are very loud. The public that benefits from them is largely quiet because till the results are born. So we've confronted corruption. The banking system was a scandal. From the Kabul Bank alone, we've realized we've collected back $450 million out of the $800 million that they stole. But do you think that the elite that was brought to the courts prevented from traveling abroad and had to yield their unlawfully gained wealth or happy? No. Contracting. One contract in one ministry involved $100 million difference. I personally preside over the procurement council, Dr. Abdullah participating, and our other ministers and vice president participating. What we need to see is the amount of hope that is invested in a leader needs to correspond to the context. I humbly acknowledge the dissatisfaction of our people because our people desire of something very simple. A friend of mine today put it well he said, after oxygen, we need peace. The toll that the conflict takes upon us needs to be appreciated. And the world needs to understand this pain. Afghanistan's tragedy is that we're an extraordinarily rich country inhabited by enormously poor people. And what we need is the breathing space to be able to generate the wealth through the reforms in the social processes that is needed. And I'm confident that we will be able to do this. And this is why you cannot walk just on the leg of security. You need to deal with a comprehensive picture of security, which ranges from human rights to women's rights to boys' rights and girls' rights, as well as the citizens' rights in general. The poverty that we inherited is grinding. 36% of the people live below $1.25. If it were $2 a day, 70% of the population will be living below that. And agriculture, where 2 million jobs can be generated, was not focused upon in the last 14 years. We're focusing in earnest on all of these, but our people have waited for 40 years. They are impatient, and they have every right to be impatient and to push us forward. And I hope that that push can result in us speeding up a lot more our efforts and that it would satisfy them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.